What's going on, guys? Billy here, and today we finally got an upgrade to the Mavic Air series of drones, which after 2 years is long overdue and much needed. So the Mavic Air 1 here, when it first came out, and even to this day, is still such a great drone. It's really held its value well over all of these years that it's been out. And when this drone first released and it was slotted under that Mavic Pro, the original Mavic Pro, in my opinion, it was the clear buy because it retained a lot of the same specs, it retained a lot of the same features, and it actually introduced some new features and had some specs that were better than that original Mavic Pro for a lesser price. In my opinion, this was 2 steps off of being a perfect drone. If it was quieter when you were flying, and if it had a better transmission system built in to go further and just to have a better connection when you're flying closer to you, I think this drone would have been perfect. But alongside fixing these 2 things with the Mavic Air 2, they also upgraded almost everything across the board, and that is why I'm so excited to check out this drone. Now, right off of the bat here, I just want to let you guys know that I don't physically have the Mavic Air 2 in my possession. It wasn't sent to me early to make a video on, and I'm not saying this to complain or to whine. I picked mine up just like everybody else. I ordered the Flymore combo and it'll get here when it gets here. But the reason I'm saying this is out of the spirit of full transparency so that you guys aren't coming to this video and I'm making it seem like I've flown the drone before. I have the Mavic Air 1 here, so I'll give you guys some thoughts and opinions that I've got on the Mavic Air 2 after my extensive history of flying DJI drones. So the main purpose in this video is just to cover my thoughts on the Mavic Air 2, and I just don't want to lead you guys astray, making you think I've got the drone when I really don't. Okay, so jumping into the first thing I want to cover about the Mavic Air 2, that is the design, which is incredibly familiar no matter which way you look at it, but regardless, it brings the Mavic line of drones full circle with a similar design across the board. You know, I kind of like the variety in DJI's drone designs that make up their lineup. It felt like each of the drones had their own personality. The Spark, the Mavic Air, the Mavic Pro series, the Phantom, the Inspire, they all have their own name, they all serve their own purpose, they all have their own design, and while each of them felt new and fresh, they still had that same DJI feeling to them. Now, again, I understand why they did this. It kind of streamlines things. We've got the Mavic Mini, the beginner drone, we've got the Mavic Air, the intermediate drone, and then we've got the higher end Mavic drones that are kind of like the prosumer side of things, but it kind of feels lifeless. They're all white and gray, and while I personally probably would never buy like a blue Spark, I still liked having the option there. It kind of mixed things up. Okay, so back to the design of the Mavic Air 2. I feel like I can show you the Mavic 2 Pro here and say, just imagine a drone that's smaller because it seriously is so identical. The arms unfold in the same directions, the battery slides in the top just like the Mavic 2, the status LEDs are placed in the same location, the propeller design is exactly the same, just a little bit smaller. The bottom plate is also kind of identical with our typical array of obstacle avoidance and vision positioning sensors, but unlike the Mavic 2, this drone has one single LED underneath. It's also worth mentioning that the Mavic Air 2 doesn't have as many obstacle avoidance sensors as that of like the Mavic 2 Zoom and the Mavic 2 Pro, but it's to be expected because the Mavic Air 2 is built into a smaller airframe. So with this drone, we've got 2 obstacle avoidance sensors on the front, 2 sensors on the bottom, and 2 sensors on the back. So we've got 6 in total, including another 2 vision positioning sensors. Now, moving away from the drone and onto the remote controller, this here is where we begin to see the most differences. Look, I've said it in the past, I am a huge fan of the Mavic's remote design, and it's clear that DJI is too, as they have been going on 4 years with it. So seeing something different now is kind of refreshing. Now, there are 2 things that come to mind when I see this remote controller. It looks like the Nintendo Switch remote when the Joy-Cons are put together, but even more so, it looks just like a smushed down version of the smart controller available for the Mavic 2 Pro, the Mavic 2 Zoom, and now the Phantom 4 Pro version 2.0 after the newest update. The biggest difference here with this remote is that the phone mount is now positioned above the remote rather than below. Some would say this is good, some would say this is bad, and I don't really have an opinion on it until I actually use the remote controller. So while we can look at it, there's really nothing more I can say until I get it in my hands and fly with it and really get an understanding of its ergonomics. Okay, so now it is finally time to discuss the camera up there on the front of the drone, which first, I've got to say right off of the bat, from the videos, from the photos, from everything that I've seen, the design looks so much better than what was present on the original Mavic Air. This thing was like mounted back inside of a cave, which, don't get me wrong, is great for protection in the event of a crash, but the upward range was really bad, especially when flying in sport mode. Now, regarding the specs of the camera, our sensor size is a bit larger in this drone at a 1/2 inch, with which we can shoot photos up to 48 megapixels, So they are 8,000 by 6,000 pixels. The aperture is f2.8. We can shoot 4K video at 60 frames per second and 1080p video at 240 frames per second. And finally, the bitrate is 120 megabits per second. In the promo video that DJI uploaded, they showed a lot of photos and a lot of video from this drone, all of which was definitely touched up to a certain degree, but I am excited to get my hands on this drone because of the camera alone, being able to shoot 4K video with a higher bitrate and also being able to take 48 megapixel photos. Not to mention, they also added a lot of different photo modes, like smart photo modes, which we'll get into when we talk about some of the different software features. Where we really begin to see just how dominant the Mavic Air 2 is when we take a deep dive into the specs. Now, starting from the top here and working our way down, the Mavic Air 2 has a flight time of 34 minutes, and this is done on a 3,500 milliamp hour battery, which makes this drone, the Mavic Air 2, the longest flying consumer level DJI drone. Now, moving on to the speed department, our top speed with the Mavic Air 2 is 42.5 miles an hour, which is fairly standard for a Mavic drone. In fact, I believe the old original Mavic Air had a top speed of around 42 miles an hour. Now, inside of the drone, we've got 8 gigabytes of internal storage. Always good to see that. I wish it was bumped up to like 16 or maybe even 32. Also, there's really no mention of ADS-B in any of their promotional content, so we'll talk about that at a later date. And finally, for the kicker, this drone has OcuSync 2.0. In fact, I believe it is an upgraded version of OcuSync 2.0, as the maximum range is 10 kilometers, puts it around 6.2 miles, whereas OcuSync 2 on the Mavic 2 Pro and the Mavic 2 Zoom only topped off at around 8 kilometers, or that was around 5 miles. So that, I think, is an upgraded version of OcuSync 2, and that's going to be really fun to test out. Just like any brand new DJI drone, of course, the Mavic Air 2 is filled with brand new software features that help it stand out from the rest of DJI's drone lineup, but they're also put into place to entice older drone owners to upgrade because their old drone can't do that one thing that they want it to do. Now, before we get into some of these software features, I do just want to express a concern of mine, and it's the fact that the DJI Mavic Air 2 runs off of the DJI Fly application rather than using the DJI Go 4 companion application. The thing is that the Go application just has so much more to it. It might not be as clean as the Fly application, but there's a lot of settings missing from like the Mavic Mini when I fly it around. There's a lot of settings I go to look for, like within the battery tab, that just aren't there, and I really hope that's not the case for the Mavic Air 2 because it's a much more powerful drone than the Mavic Mini, and it deserves a full suite of settings to change, because if it doesn't have that, it's just going to take away from the experience. Now, when DJI says that this is their smartest drone ever, they weren't lying, because I counted 9 different smart modes or 9 different smart features added to the Mavic Air 2, and some of them actually look good. So look, there's really no way I can discuss this without showing it to you guys, so I'm going to run down the list here of things they added and give a little blurb about each of them. So first of all, 8K hyperlapse. Of course, we're taking 48 megapixel photos, so they're going to be massive. Smart photo, which is kind of like HDR photos and hyperlight combined. So hyperlight was used at nighttime to clean up noise in an image. It works really well, so it looks like this will actually be a usable photo mode to get nice looking photos right out of the drone. There's no way that's going to shoot raw photos. It'll typically probably come out in a JPEG. Moving on, we've got Focus Track, Spotlight 2.0, Point of Interest 3.0, Active Track 3.0, and APAS 3.0. So there's 5 things right there. All of them are basically upgrades to the Active Track system in one way or the other, with all these different intelligent flight modes available with the Mavic Air 2. So they're kind of building on what they've put in previous drones. We've seen this before. We've seen them come out with Active Track 2.0. We've seen them come out with APAS, which was actually originally introduced with the Mavic Air. So now we've got upgrades to all of those features that we already know and love. And finally, I put quick shots on here. We don't have any new quick shots. I'm kind of surprised about that. We've got the same 6 that were available in the drones that we have now. Figured I'd just include that. So overall, if you guys couldn't have guessed from this video, I am pumped. I am psyched about the Mavic Air 2. In my opinion, it is nothing but a winning formula for DJI, as they're taking a drone that, in my opinion, is near perfect, and they're improving upon it. They're improving upon it in ways I never would have expected them to. Like, for example, adding OcuSync to a lower tier drone, taking that higher tier transmission system and putting it into a lower tier drone. It's just something I never thought I would have seen them do. It makes the Mavic Air 2 such a more viable option for literally anybody because the Wi-Fi transmission system is so unreliable that now the drone is so much more versatile and so much more usable in a lot of different situations. Now, the cherry on top, right, is the price of this drone, coming in at the base model at $799. Replacing the Mavic Air at the same price is just killer. I would have expected a drone of this caliber to cost a little bit extra, but coming in at that same price of $800 is honestly just, again, the cherry on top. Now, the Mavic Air 2 is great, but what I think is going to be really interesting is to see how this affects DJI's current lineup. So the Mavic Mini is fine. That's DJI's beginner drone. The Mavic Air 2 is a great upgrade from the Mavic Mini, but how is the Mavic Air 2 going to affect the Mavic 2 Pro? I almost feel like history is repeating itself because when the Mavic Air came out, the first one, this one right here, a lot of people were saying, well, why do I need to spend more money on the Mavic Pro, the original one, when this drone does a lot of the same things? And now there's going to be a lot of people thinking the same thing about the Mavic Air 2. It does a lot of things just as good as the Mavic 2 series. In fact, it does some things better. So it is going to be a very interesting year from DJI because this puts a lot of pressure on them to now update that Mavic, the prosumer version of the Mavic, because everything is called Mavic now. So it's going to put a lot of pressure on them to release something because they're now dipping into the sales of the Mavic 2 Pro and the Mavic 2 Zoom, although I guess they'd rather dip into those sales rather than somebody else, although the Evo 2 is pretty good. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think of the Mavic Air 2 down in the description. I love the comment section. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say, and as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.